When George turned 88, his granddaughter threw him a party with balloons, a jazz band, and a cake that said, "Still dancing." And he was, literally. George twirled his great granddaughter on the living room rug, stood straight as a soldier, and spoke with the clarity of a man half his age. People kept asking him the same question all night: "What's your secret?" George would always grin and say something charming like, "Whiskey and stubbornness." But in truth, he knew exactly why he was still thriving. Years ago, during his annual physical at 65, his doctor had told him something that stuck. If you can avoid these four conditions, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and cognitive decline, you just might outlive everyone you know. Back then, George hadn't paid much attention. He still smoked his occasional cigar, ate what he wanted, and laughed at the idea of stretching. But slowly, subtly, he changed. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. And now, nearly 3 decades later, his doctor's words echoed as truth. The first condition he dodged was diabetes. George grew up in a time when sugar was a treat, not a diet staple. But in his 40s and 50s, processed foods had crept into his meals. His waist grew, his energy dipped, and during one checkup, his blood sugar had hovered just below pre-diabetic. That was the scare he needed. He started small, walked to the store instead of driving, cut soda entirely, learned to love lentils. He didn't count every carb, but he stayed away from the obvious sugar traps. Over time, his body thanked him. His weight dropped, his blood sugar stabilized, and he felt lighter, not just in pounds, but in spirit. Avoiding diabetes hadn't just saved his pancreas, it gave him back his afternoons, no longer dulled by fatigue and cravings. The second enemy was heart disease. George's father had died of a heart attack at 62, right in the middle of mowing the lawn. That image haunted George, how fast life could end if the heart gave out. So he took his heart seriously. He learned about cholesterol, about the dangers of salt and saturated fats. He still enjoyed his Sunday roast, but he added more fish, nuts, and greens to his plate. And he moved. Not in a gym, not with dumbbells, but in life. He danced in the kitchen. He raked leaves without complaint. He refused to retire into a recliner. His doctor once said his arteries looked younger than most 60-year-olds. That made George proud. Not because of the numbers, but because it meant more time. More days to watch the sunrise. More birthdays with his grandchildren. The third condition, the big one, was cancer. George had known many friends who didn't make it past 70 because of some form of cancer. It always felt like a lightning strike, random, cruel. But when his doctor told him that lifestyle still played a role, George listened. He quit smoking entirely, stopped using the harsh chemical cleaners he'd used for decades, got regular screenings. He paid attention to his body. When a mole changed shape on his shoulder, he saw a dermatologist. It was precancerous, caught early, removed cleanly. He didn't fear cancer, but he respected its unpredictability. That awareness, that vigilance, kept him ahead of it. And so far, the lightning hadn't struck. The fourth and final condition was cognitive decline. This one scared George the most. He'd watched his older sister slip away into Alzheimer's, forgetting birthdays, then names, then her own reflection. He never wanted that. So he gave his brain something to do. Every day. He read books, real ones, with pages and dog ears. He learned to play chess in his 70s, took up Spanish in his 80s. He stopped watching the news for hours and instead started writing stories, little tales from his childhood, for his great-grandkids to read one day. He also stayed social. That, his doctor told him, was just as important as puzzles and brain games. George joined a walking group. He volunteered at the community garden. He flirted a little at the grocery store. Laughter, conversation, even arguing about politics. These, he believed, kept his mind sharp. There was no one miracle, no magic supplement. Just 4 conditions avoided with quiet intention. And in exchange, George had gained time. Real time. Not just years on the calendar, but living years. Now, as the music played and his family surrounded him, George sat with a cup of tea and watched the faces of 4 generations swirl around the room. He saw his daughter dancing with her husband, his son laughing with the neighbors, his youngest great-grandchild chasing the dog in circles. And he felt something rare, peace. He might live another year or 10. That part wasn't his to choose. But the way he'd arrived at this moment, with clarity, with strength, Without tubes or pills or fog, that had been his doing. Later that night, after the last slice of cake was eaten and the guests had left, George stood on his porch, wrapped in a wool sweater, listening to the wind. The stars blinked above. His bones ached just a little, but his breath was steady. He thought again of the doctor's words. No diabetes, no heart disease, no cancer, no dementia. He smiled, muttering to himself, 4 little dodges for a whole life gained. And with that, he stepped back inside, not feeling old at all.